Paris, the capital of France and the host of the 2024 Olympics. With the games just a couple weeks away, along with a busy summer travel season, millions of tourists are heading off to the City of Light, many of them arriving by airplane. There are 3 commercial airports serving Paris: Charles de Gaulle, Orly, and Beauvais-Tillé. Let's compare these airports, from their history to Paris transportation options to Olympic preparations. I'm Chicago Geographer and welcome to the channel. Don't forget to subscribe for videos just like this one every other week, and let's get started. First of all, let's sort out where these airports are. Charles de Gaulle is about 21 kilometers northeast of central Paris, next to the town of Orly in France. Orly is a bit closer to Paris, located about 14 kilometers south of the city center. It's shared by a handful of suburbs, most notably Orly, no surprise there. The big outlier is Beauvais-Tillé, which is literally outlying almost 70 kilometers north of central Paris. The airport is in Tillé, which is just outside of Beauvais, hence the name. However, it brands itself as Paris-Beauvais these days, but make no mistake, it's not operated by Group ADP, the company in charge of both CDG and ORY, and general aviation hub Le Bourget. Regardless of these differences, all 3 airports fill a certain niche for Paris air travel, and together make up one of the world's largest air travel markets. CDG is the busiest airport in all of France, with 67.4 million passengers in 2023, which ranks 11th worldwide. ORY handled about half that passenger count, which is still an impressive 32.3 million passengers, making it the 2nd busiest airport nationally. Lastly, BVA is a much smaller airport by comparison, with 5.66 million passengers in 2023. That was, in fact, its busiest year ever by over 1 million people, becoming the 10th busiest airport in France. The history of how this came to be is fascinating, so let's quickly run through it. Beauvais was constructed in the 1930s, but it soon came under the control of Nazi Germany during their occupation of France in World War II. They used it as a military airfield until Allied forces reclaimed it in 1944. In its post-war years, it was approved to become a NATO airfield, but plans were scrapped by 1953 due to funding issues. Instead, it opened for commercial flights 2 years later, and for decades was a very small facility for regional flights. Fast forward to the 1990s, and EU airline deregulation allowed low-cost carriers like Ryanair to greatly expand operations. They selected BVA as a new destination in 1997, which jump-started exponential growth. In under a decade, annual passenger numbers skyrocketed from 64,000 to over 1.4 million in 2004, and as we know, reached a record high of 5.66 million last year. Today, Ryanair continues to carry this airport forward, with their flights accounting for 80% of passenger traffic, bringing travelers to and from a wide variety of European and Moroccan destinations. Other prominent airlines at BVA include low-cost carriers Wizz Air and EasyJet. As you can see, BVA is essentially the budget airport for Paris air travel, offering cheaper flights to many smaller cities and other secondary airports. Beauvais has 2 runways and 2 terminals. Orly Airport is even older than Beauvais, originating as an American airbase at the end of World War I. It was developed into a passenger airport during the interwar period, but much like Beauvais, it fell to the Germans in the Second World War. After this, it returned to commercial use while also remaining an active US Air Force base. Passenger flights greatly expanded in the post-war years, with a state-of-the-art terminal opening in 1961. The joint civil and military nature of the airport did lead to some tensions, especially while French authorities embarked on expansion plans. The US negotiated their way out of French attempts to kick them out during the 50s, but by 1966, France issued an order for all NATO troops to leave by March 1967, and so the US was finally forced to leave. In the meantime, Orly emerged as the primary airport of Paris and was highly influential on the growth of the post-war city. Today, it remains the busiest airport for domestic flights within France, and about 24 different airlines offer passenger service. And lastly, Charles de Gaulle is the youngest airport of the 3, turning just 50 years old this year. Planning for CDG began in 1957, as local authorities recognized that a new airport would help avoid overcrowding at Orly and Le Bourget, which I should briefly explain. Le Bourget was in fact the first passenger airport for Paris, opening in 1919, but it was relatively small and was overtaken by Orly during the 1950s. It continued offering commercial flights through the end of the 1970s, when it shifted to private aviation. Back to CDG now, it opened in 1974 and effectively removed the need for Le Bourget to remain a commercial airport. Charles de Gaulle was an absolutely massive airport both for its time and for European standards. Its design was careful to accommodate the ever-increasing size of jet planes and offered passengers a cutting-edge terminal. It quickly became a bustling facility, overtaking Orly by the mid-90s and establishing itself as the primary international flight hub for Paris. A second terminal opened in 1981, which is much bigger than the first and contains several large subsections, and a third terminal serves low-cost and charter flights. CDG has 4 paved runways and 1 turf runway. Dozens of global airlines have service to and from the airport today, and it continues to grow in importance, evidenced by Air France's decision to cease all but one of their flights at Orly by 2026. So now we know a bit about the history of each airport and the role they play in the air travel market of Paris, but how do we get to and from the airports? Thankfully, public transit around Paris is impressively comprehensive, so there are a lot of options. Starting with Charles de Gaulle, the airport itself has 2 people mover systems that connect the terminals and other facilities. To get to and from the city center, the RER-B line stops at terminals 1 and 2, which is a hybrid commuter rail and rapid transit system throughout the area. Need to get to other cities in France from CDG? Look no further than the TGV station at Terminal 2, offering many high-speed train routes throughout the country. Drivers can get to and from the airport on the A1 auto route, one of the largest highways in France. Orly Airport is also incredibly well served by public transit. Like CDG, it has its own transit system, Orlyval, which not only connects the terminals for free, but for an extra fare also leaves the airport and runs to the suburb of Antony, where you can transfer to the RER-B line. The Ile-de-France tramway line T7 stops at the airport, part of a suburban tram system connecting the towns surrounding Paris, and amazingly, just a few weeks before this video was published, Orly became connected to the Paris Metro as the final stop on Line 14. Originally, this was planned to happen in 2027, but work was expedited in time for the Olympics. With its opening, direct rapid transit from Orly to the heart of Paris is now possible without transferring in Antony. And of course, drivers can take the A106 or Route 7 straight to the airport as well. In transportation, Beauvais is once again much different than the others. Because of its significant distance outside the Paris area and instead being in a much smaller city, public transit is limited to buses. There are 4 Aerobus shuttles that go straight to various destinations around Paris. The city of Beauvais also provides its own bus system to take passengers to the center of Beauvais and its train station, from which you can get to Paris and elsewhere in France. For drivers, the airport itself isn't directly connected to any major highways, but the A16 passes to the east, and from there, local roads take you to the airport. To wrap up the video with one more segment, let's quickly take a look at how the 2024 Olympics are impacting the airports and how the airports themselves are preparing. During the evening hours on opening ceremony day, July 26th, a flight ban covering a wide region surrounding Paris will be enacted for health and safety reasons. This, of course, led to flight cancellations at all 3 airports, and the low-cost carriers operating at Beauvais are particularly impacted. Also due to the games, the shuttle from Beauvais to the west side of Paris has been cancelled, presumably due to the major preparations and media presence set for this area. Both Orly and Charles de Gaulle could see some turmoil very soon, with a call for strikes on July 17th at both airports sent out by workers' unions. Now, I'm writing this video in early July, so things could change very quickly by then, but anyway. A main reason for the strike is workers not receiving bonuses that would help compensate for the Olympics traffic surge, inevitably making their jobs more complicated. The strike would be right before athletes are scheduled to begin arriving in Paris, and although it likely won't cause flight cancellations, it's definitely an interesting scenario and demonstrates the massive effect that the games are having on air travel. Beyond the strike, authorities are preparing for the rush out of Paris in August to have the biggest impact on travel, writing that August 11th through 13th will be days of peak airport attendance. Baggage handling systems at both ORY and CDG have been upgraded in anticipation of the Olympics with new screening and sorting technology. As I mentioned earlier, Orly also had its Paris Metro connection expedited in time for the games, which was otherwise set to open 3 years later. CDG was also set to get a new direct Paris connection years ago, the CDG Express, but it's been pushed back several times since the early 2000s and is now slated for 2027. Although it is a shame that this project isn't done in time for the Olympics, the airport has improved in other ways too, such as installing additional check-in stations. With all these different preparations, it'll definitely be interesting to see how the airports actually handle the increased traffic, so if you're heading off to Paris by plane, let me know in the comments how your experience at these airports is. And with that, I hope you enjoyed this comparison of the Paris airports. If you're making your way to Paris soon, I wish you a smooth journey. I'd also like to quickly thank my YouTube members and Twitch subs for sending me some pictures of these airports that I could use in this video. Thanks so much, guys. And of course, thanks to each and every one of you for watching this video. Once again, don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you next time.